In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And after creating all living things and creating man in his own image, God saw all that he had made, and it was good. What happened with the perfect world which God had created? Why is there suffering and pain and hurting and death and fear? Why? Those are questions we're hoping to answer during the next part of this film. We have invited Pastor Judge Ram from Emmanuel Church in Handsworth to talk about why there is suffering from a biblical point of view.
According to the Bible, in the beginning, there was no suffering in the world. Everything was perfect. Man lived in harmony with God and his environment. However, the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 3 that something happened. Adam and Eve disobeyed God. This disobedience theologians call the fall of man. Man fell from perfection and became a sinner, and death ensued. This sin formed a barrier between God and man. Man was now dead in his relationship with God, and because man was given authority by God over nature, when he sinned, death also came to the whole of creation. Consequently, nature was also thrown into chaos. Sin brought death to the world. The intimate relationship that man had with God was destroyed, and suffering came to this world.
So we have seen how suffering came into the world through people turning away from God. But what about innocent people? What about children? What about people who lead godly lives? Why do they still suffer? Trevor and his wife left comfortable jobs and gave most of their lives to serve the Lord. But their own lives, now that they are retired, are not easy.
As part of normal church life, we were involved in praying for missionary situations, for example in Central and Eastern Europe. And as we prayed more, we became more and more concerned about the Christians who were there and the things we were hearing that they were having to face under the communist regimes. And so it became possible, as we linked in with this particular mission, to travel in 1972. That was our first journey behind the Iron Curtain into Eastern Europe. Following on from that, the Lord burdened our hearts greatly that we become full-time engaged in this ministry. And so, believing the Lord was leading this way, it wasn't just an emotional response, it was a growing concern over several years actually. Of course, to the outside world, it seemed a crazy decision. We had good jobs, we were very comfortable in our home, and yet the Lord was leading us and calling us to work in this situation. And that's how we came to be involved. And that involvement went on for 30 years with Slavic Gospel Association. As we came to retirement age from this ministry, we found, like many people do, that health problems began to set in. For example, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, which called for 20 sessions of radiotherapy, and I'm still under surveillance for that. And then my wife, 2.5 years ago, was diagnosed with scale 4 inoperable ovarian cancer. And to see her going through all the trauma of a total of 24 weeks of chemotherapy interspersed with major surgery was the most difficult experience. In fact, through those days that have passed over recent years, there have been some very, very dark days indeed, where we have felt acutely the problems that these health situations have brought to our lives.
The Bible tells us that God can take suffering and use it for a good purpose in the lives of his people. God alerts and directs us to himself in our suffering. Imagine if in this fallen world there was no suffering, so there was no pain. So we never experience backache or stomach pain or headaches. It sounds good, doesn't it? But is it? Let's say cancer is growing in our stomach or spine and we feel no pain. Is that good? No. In this case, pain is good because it alerts us. It tells us there is something wrong, that there is a problem and we need to go and see the doctor and sort it out. Likewise, suffering can have a good purpose. It's like the pain in the stomach, alerting us to sort our lives out. Suffering demonstrates the fact that we are weak. It breaks us down and forces us to think of our priorities in life, our values and our goals. It makes us think of our relationship with people and with God.
In all of this experience, we've found some people asking us, well, why has God allowed this to happen to you? If you're Christians and you've served him for all these years, why you? And I think my dear wife has given the perfect answer to this when she said, well, why not? The fact that we're Christians doesn't mean that we're protected from these things. We are human. And yet what we have found in all of this is that God has given, underpinning, his strength and his grace to face these situations, even the very dark days that we have gone through.
God is the one who knows about suffering. God has identified himself with suffering. God, the Bible tells us, out of love for the world, sent his Son into the world to suffer and die. God is not some remote being who is detached from human suffering. No. If we ask the question, where is God in suffering? Where is God in that disaster? Where is God when we go through pain? Where is God in that broken home? Where is God in that famine? Where is God in that human affliction? The answer is this. God is right there in the midst of it. Out of love, Jesus, being God, became a man and entered into humanity. He suffered by being born in poverty, in a stable, a cowshed. Jesus was born in poverty. He suffered all his life. He was tempted. He knew about hunger. He grew tired. He knew about being betrayed by his own friends. The Bible tells us that he was despised and rejected by men. He suffered on a cross at Calvary.
What we have found is that there are many positive things that have come out of this. We found the opportunities to speak to other patients and their families because we have been in the same situation that they have and sought to bring them encouragement and the gospel, how Jesus can be very precious in and through these times. Also, what we have found is that it's sharpened our priorities enormously. In other words, what really matters in this life? How best to use the time that God gives to us? And then it's given us a perspective of heaven, of life after this life. For we know that as Christians the best is yet to be. And eternity is there, where there's no sickness, no suffering.